Now, Sligo TD Marc MacSharry says he has resigned from Fianna Fáil due to Taoiseach Micheál Martin's handling of a bullying complaint made against him. Joining me now, political editor for the Irish Independent, across the front of the paper this morning, Philip Ryan. Good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, the reason for resigning is not so much the bullying complaint, which might have been processed rather more quietly, but the manner of the handling of the complaint. So he says.
That certainly is the suggestion in his resignation statement. And it's kind of a complicated one because this complaint was made. It was made by a local councillor from his constituency, a man called Donal Gilroy. It was made when it emerged that Fianna Fáil was going to consider taking him back into the party after he had resigned in September 2021 over the Simon Coveney motion of no confidence over his handling of this COVID rule breaching party in his department. So when it was suggested that he was going to come back into the party, Mr. Gilroy made this complaint and highlighted to Fianna Fáil. Two text messages essentially are included in the complaint, in which, as Mr. MacSharry says himself, he used pretty robust language when discussing a local constituency matter around cardiology services. Within a group for Fianna Fáil councillors, a WhatsApp group. So that transpired, and then at the following meeting, the Taoiseach informed the Parliamentary Party that they wouldn't be going ahead as planned and as had been expected with MacSharry's readmittance because an issue had arose, and this is the issue.
Now, the idea that, according to Marc MacSharry himself, it should have been handled locally first. It shouldn't have been elevated to national level, and breach of confidentiality, denial of due process. That's what he's complaining about, and that's what's led to his resignation. Do we know, was Councillor Donal Gilroy kind of in line to get the nomination locally if Marc MacSharry should not be available as a Fianna Fáil candidate?
I asked Donal Gilroy that very question yesterday, and he said he has no interest in entering into national politics. He feels that he's a man in his 50s, and he said that, and he's a relatively new councillor as well, that he doesn't actually have any interest in going into national politics, and you have to take his word for that. The complaint itself was made to the Fianna Fáil head office, to the party's headquarters in Dublin, so I presume it just had to be dealt with at that level. What Marc MacSharry would argue, and indeed some of his Fianna Fáil colleagues who have remained in the party, is that it shouldn't have been something that had prevented his readmittance. It should have been something that could have been dealt with in parallel. That, okay, there's a complaint here. This is something, a bit of friction within a constituency setup, which is not uncommon around the country. That would be dealt with. It could be dealt with head office, or it could be dealt with externally, or it could just be moved along. And at the same time, Mr. MacSharry could be let back into the party.
One of the issues that Marc MacSharry raises in his own news release is that Micheál Martin's support within the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party is wafer-thin, and putting in or allowing one of his sterner critics back into the party would be something that Micheál Martin would not want, hence this procedure.
Now, look, you can be sure that Micheál Martin doesn't want to sit there every Wednesday night for the Parliamentary Party meetings and listen to Marc MacSharry berate him and berate his leadership of Fianna Fáil. The test of what support he has in the party hasn't happened just yet. Remember, Marc MacSharry, I think it was last year as well, or earlier this year, before he left the party, was collecting a series of names to launch a heave, and the figure that he needed was 10. And the group who were trying to get that letter to launch a heave against Micheál Martin didn't reach the figure of 10. So that would suggest that maybe the other party members didn't feel that was the time to push Mr. Martin out, or it was just maybe he has more supporters than people might believe on the other side of the argument.
So I'm just thinking, when I read the text, and there is some vulgar language in the text is issued by Marc MacSharry, but I was thinking what a faint-hearted party it has become since the time of Charles J. Haughey and B.J. Mara. If this is what upsets people, they could not have lived in that era.
Now, I took maybe possibly I looked at those text messages myself, and what, like you said, there is some pretty strong language, and there is the F word is used quite regularly. But I did go back to Mr. Gilroy yesterday and asked him, because he specifically does say in his complaint that he considers the behaviour to be bullying aimed at him personally, mostly because it was in a group of councillors rather than it was sent to him personally. So there was other people who could see it. But I did ask him. I said, you do stand over the accusation that you felt bullied, and he said, look, this behaviour is just not acceptable anymore, and he continued to stand over the claim that those two messages amounted to bullying.
Okay. Do we know what support Marc MacSharry has finally in Sligo? I mean, if he ran as an independent in a couple of years' time, would he get a seat, maybe at the expense of Fianna Fáil?
Well, look, you have to look at it like that. Fianna Fáil aren't doing great in the polls nationally, and even less so in Connacht Ulster. So having the brand MacSharry, not forgetting his father, was also a political heavyweight for Fianna Fáil in that area too. Having that name and that brand in Sligo is something that any politician would like. And if he does decide to run as independent, I think he could probably stand a good chance of keeping his seat.
Philip Ryan, political editor with the Irish Independent, thank you very much.